Hello, hello, and welcome back to the QCraft Ditch Summit, where we are all about equipping you and inspiring you with ways to teach with those sound teaching practices that really create for the great teaching and learning in class. And if you're just joining us for the first time on this video, welcome. Hopefully you'll enjoy all the rest of our videos. And if you're back for yet another one, glad to have you back. And today in this video, we're going to have Kristina Ishmael, and she's going to be talking to us all about open educational resources. And so Kristina led the Go Open initiative for the U.S. Department of Education for a while, and is now working with New America and is going all over the United States to work with school districts and with states to help them implement more of these open educational resources. You know, these resources that we've got out on the web that we can use to teach with you know, lesson plans and lots of different materials, digital materials that we can use, and so on and so forth. So anyway, that's Kristina. Now, you may have noticed in some of the other videos that usually the guests introduce themselves, and that was the case with this video, but we had some issues with the recording of this one, and it kind of cut in and out and everything. So I have gone into this video and have tried to clean up any of the glitches with some video editing afterwards. And so hopefully it'll be a fairly seamless experience for you. We've got some little text boxes to help you see some of the things that got cut out. And I'll actually pop in one other time, kind of like this to fill in the blanks. But anyway, it's such a great message, and really empowers you to use some of these resources that are out there, that a lot of which I think a lot of us didn't realize that they existed. So anyway, thank you for your patience as we clean this video up and try to make it as viewable for you as possible. And I hope that you enjoy this conversation as much as I had having it.
Came from the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Ed Tech and their whole Go Open project, which I led at one point, and then was charged with kind of cultivating momentum, building and sustaining the momentum around this work. So the Hewlett Foundation, UNESCO, like, they all have their own definitions of what open educational resources are. One that I always refer to, the National Ed Tech Plan that comes from the Office of Ed Tech. They're teaching, learning, and research resources that exist in the public domain or have a license attached to them that allow their free use, reuse, modification, and then the redistribution. So in the terms that we kind of talk about in OER, it's the 5 R's. So I get to reuse the content without having to worry about it. I can retain it, meaning that I get to keep it in perpetuity. Revise it, meaning I get to customize it and localize it for my context, for my students. That also includes translation. So as a former ELL teacher, when I translated a lot of English curriculum into Spanish, I didn't realize that if it were copyrighted, I was actually infringing copyright. So if it is something that, yes, let that sink in for a moment. Yes, okay. So if it's something that's Creative Commons licensed, I don't have to worry about that. So then I get to revise that, remix it. If you're familiar with kind of app smashing or pulling in different multimedia, I get to remix the content. And then the redistribution, which is the key in kind of all of this OER community, because it's not just sharing things with your team or the teachers across the hall, but it's actually putting it back out there for other community members and educators, not only in the US, but internationally, to be able to use. So Creative Commons license allows that to happen. So it's different than traditional copyright and allows those 5 R's. Awesome.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And sorry, you had mentioned the textbook thing. Sorry, I wanted to go back to that too. So there's really continuous courses that may be developed like with a grade level or content area focus, or even at a district level that people share out. And then you can kind of curate those into full units of study. So when I taught 2nd grade, if I did my geometry unit and we were looking at fractions, I would put together my pre-assessment to gauge where kids were, whole group lesson, small group lesson, additional scaffolds for my ELL and special education students, enrichment for my gifted and talented. So you build out that kind of unit of study that you would typically teach, and then your post-assessment to make sure that they had mastered the standard and we were ready to move on. And then there's also fully baked things that exist that are openly licensed. So there are fully openly licensed textbooks that exist out there, as well as courses. And so, yes, it's a little different than a digital textbook because of the licensing that's involved, but those do exist as well. So it's not like piecemealing everything and that you have to do it that way, because there are fully baked curricula that exist. 16 out of 20 of my kids my first year that didn't speak English when they came to me, so the district issued curriculum was not sufficient, and I spent a lot of time out there searching for supplemental resources. That is actually where a lot of districts start, supplemental resources. So it is making a more concerted effort to kind of recognize the work that teachers do in going out to websites and different repositories and finding the resources, and maybe making that a more district issue or a district kind of focused team effort where that can be done on a larger scale, that can be shared out, so that not every teacher is responsible for doing that. So that is going to individual places and finding supplemental resources. Maybe it's lacking in the current or the curriculum that you have in place, but it could also just be that you need some additional enrichment things. That happens too. So supplemental is really where things kind of get started so that you can kind of ease your way in or dip your toes in. The Go Open districts, the launch districts were those that were just getting started with OER, and they committed to replacing one textbook in one grade level and one content area. So it was a manageable kind of bite-sized chunk. So 6th grade science, for example, they weren't scaling K-12 right away. It was very focused in one grade level and content area. They could start to find the resources to use instead of a textbook. Mm-hmm. So that would be kind of an entry point for a lot of folks, and how I see it happening in a lot of classrooms. So whether it is, my friends in Liberty, Missouri, and Liberty Public Schools that started in, they started in November 2015, right after Go Open launched. They had no courses that had OER. And so they had a former Missouri Teacher of the Year that does their 8th grade social studies. And he was like, I'm trained in using primary sources. I know where to find different resources that are either in the public domain or have that Creative Commons license affixed to them. So let's start building this out. And so he supplemented things that they had in the classroom, and then they eventually kind of built it out so that everything for 8th grade US history now is OER or free. So they are able to use that. So that would be a prime example of ways that you can kind of dip your toes in the water. Different repositories and websites, and like briefly screen share that with you all so that you can kind of see what you have to even get started. 12 OER in Practice kind of project site that I have here. It gives you some historical information around, it gives you an overview of the project, as well as historical information around pre-K-12 OER. We've also been mapping the districts that are doing this, recognizing districts that are using OER in any way, shape, or form. There's about 220 districts that we've recognized. So above and beyond the Go Open districts that are available on the Office of Ed Tech's website, but more districts that are doing this. And then the tab, the resources to get started. And this is where I would point people to, and this is by no means exhaustive in any way, but this is where I go to get started. And so I have created this list. It's filterable by grade level, content area, resource type. I've also tried to note different things kind of on that side, that right column, as far as different notes. And so whenever we talked about what is OER, I mentioned the 5 R's, and it's important to note there is a difference between open and free. Free is not the same as open, because free means that it's free to use, but there is still technically a copyright attached to that. So open has that Creative Commons license that allows those 5 R's. However, it's important to note that we can all play in the same sandbox. So I can play with my proprietary things, the paid items like a textbook, in addition to the free resources, in addition to the openly licensed resources. It's also just kind of knowing what I can and cannot do with those. So there's this lovely list, and it's meant to be a living, breathing document. I've added several different websites to this since this went live in April, and it tells you what you can find out there. So there may be fully openly licensed textbooks, like the college open textbooks right here. But then you may go to something more like Curriculum Pathways, which have resources that are not necessarily OER, but are free and could be used, or Curriki, which is more of a repository of some of these resources. So if it's for individual resources that you're looking for, I recommend Illinois' Open Educational Resources Repository, because they've been doing this work for a number of years. And then the one that kind of everyone goes to, which is OER Commons, because they have learning objects that range from a variety of grade levels, content areas. They have full units that they've created. You can actually upload your own content in there, and they're just a great partner to work with in a lot of the stuff that I've been doing over the past couple of years. And then if you're looking for more of that full kind of curriculum to start from and use as more of a foundation, and then customize and revise and remix from there, one of the places that a lot of districts that I've worked with, they start is with CK12. And CK12 has a variety of flex books. So they have these, they're very similar to a textbook, but they can be completely customized on their platform. You go in there, create a teacher account, you can reorder the chapters, you can change vocabulary, you can add in different images. So whenever I taught in Omaha, Nebraska, I wanted to pull in local photos so that kids would get to know like their own city. And so I would pull in my own local resources that either I would go take pictures of, or that I would find on places like Wikipedia and that have those Creative Commons licensed objects. So CK12 provides a great option for that to work as kind of your foundation, and then customize from there. They also have some new interactives and simulations that are available that complement the flex books. So this is my go-to, but I'm also a little biased because I spent time working on this.
Yeah. But that sounds, I mean, this is the thing that I think I was missing before. And I'm Hey there. So back again to explain another part of the video recording that got cut off. And it's kind of a shame, you know, people say that whenever you have to explain a joke, once you've told it, then that's kind of the hallmark of a bad joke. This is one of those stories that I've got to explain a little bit so that you get some of the things that we talk about a little bit later. So I was trying to wrap my brain around the idea of these flex books that Kristina just talked about, and just about using open educational resources in general. And I was trying to compare it to something. And so I said, you know, I can imagine this huge library full of all of these books, all of these walls of books. And I said, this is one of those libraries that has one of those ladders, you know, that you can kind of like swing around from place to place in the library. I was trying to make a connection to a movie. And so Kristina said, oh yeah, that sounds like Beauty and the Beast. And so I launched off onto this huge comparison of open educational resources to Beast's library and Beauty and the Beast. So you're going to hear about this kind of over and over again. And I talked about how each one of these resources that's available is kind of like a book or an entire bookshelf in Beauty and the Beast in Beast's library. And Belle would climb up on the ladder and would pull one of these books down, and then she would be able to, you know, kind of like take things out of it and use it, and started to make the comparison to this being kind of like a 3-ring binder where you can take things out of this library and you can stick it into another one. It was this big long comparison. I'm sorry that the actual conversation was lost on this. It was a lot of fun, but at least now you're kind of caught up and you know what we're talking about here. So whenever we make that comparison, now you sort of know where we're going with it. So let's catch back up on the discussion. It up, and she takes out chapter 6, and she takes out chapter 13 because they don't fit, and then she takes chapter 5 and she makes it chapter 9, and then she starts you know, takes out her I don't know if you know, there's a photocopier in Beast's mansion, but maybe there is. And
we're gonna pretend there is.
Right. Yeah. And I know I did just talk about photocopies, and this is all like digital content and everything, but still,
it's okay.
You know, she creates her own chapter 3 and slides that in there. And then now all of a sudden that binder is really fully customized. And the great thing about it is that she started with a base, and she didn't have to create everything from scratch. She didn't have to totally reinvent the wheel. She just kind of went and made things as, you know, as was necessary, and kept the other stuff as. And so I'm thinking, like, if instead of adopting traditional textbooks, isn't this a great, and this isn't an endorsement for CK12 or anything, but just that term Flexbooks just hit me. And I started thinking, isn't that a great option for schools that want to have some more customization and don't want to just do the cookie cutter textbooks, but B, I've got to think that that's got to be so much cheaper for a school district to adopt, even if they did, photocopy and print off and put these all into 3-ring binders or something. And I mean, there's that side of things, or doing it digitally or whatever. I've got to think that any of that has got to be a really valid option. So A, am I off base here? And B, do you know of anybody who's actually done stuff like this?
Yes, you queued that up so nicely. I've got 2 examples.
Okay, there we go.
All right. So the first one that I want to tell you about is North Kansas City Public Schools. So just north of Kansas City. They have about 20,000 students. Their director of online learning, Sean Nash, he was kind of charged with looking at 6th grade science, which is why I often go directly to 6th grade science talking about a lot of this, a couple of years ago. And they said, we have a $600,000 budget that we would typically spend on 6th grade science. We need new textbooks. But they knew that standards were changing. Missouri is not adopting NGSS, but they were going to make their own science standards. And so they didn't necessarily want to buy like brand new ones because they knew the standards would be changing. So Sean is a former high school science teacher, as well as Mitzi Nessa, who is also kind of his component. They used to do the instructional technology stuff and have now moved on to different positions within the district. But they were the ones that started this. And so they started with a 6th grade science Flexbook from CK12. And they went through it that summer before they were going to implement. And they made sure that all the vocabulary was aligned with the Missouri State. Their chapters, they made sure that it was scoped and sequenced based off of the standards that they knew they needed to be at a certain place by March or April of the spring semester. And then they spent money on printing. So they did print because they were a 1-to-4 kind of environment, so 1 device for every 4 students, and they knew that they weren't going to be able to keep it digital. They did chapter or unit by unit instead of printing the entire thing, because then they got a cohort of 6th grade science teachers together that would then add additional resources throughout the school year. So they were kind of iterating as they implemented, which is awesome to see. So they compensated the teachers for doing that. They printed in full color. They also purchased Veneer Technologies, which is the probeware that goes into iPads. And so they spent some money on getting kids being scientists. Imagine that. And getting them in the lab. And so at the end of their year, they spent a total of $60,000 and reinvested the $540,000 savings back into their school district.
Wow. Holy cow.
That's a lot of money.
Can we just say $540,000 again compared to the $60,000 that they spent on textbooks? Can I just stop for a second and say, what in the world would it look like in most school districts if we freed up $500,000 to go towards instruction and materials and, experiences,
professional learning,
travel and professional learning, and just all of that stuff that we keep saying, oh, sorry, it's not in the budget. Now we just, I don't know how big this district is, but $500,000 has to have a huge impact.
Huge impact. So to follow up on that, so they scaled 6, 7, 8 science now, and then they started to do stuff as well. I visited their school district in October of last year, and I was there. I got to see one of the classrooms that was still using the print, and then one of the classrooms that were using their iPads, and it was all digital at that point. But while I was there, they were rolling out 1-to-1 for the entire district because they had reinvested all of that money over the course of several years, and then were able to go 1-to-1. I mean, that's a fantastic story. And then like you mentioned, the professional learning and all of the extra things that you think about, the materials that we say, we can't afford this, that we could, we certainly could. And it's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you can do something like that, when you can finally go 1-to-1, and that's a huge financial, it's a huge investment for any sort of school district. And if you don't have to go into debt to do it, if you don't have to like float a bond issue or anything, and you can just, pull the trigger. I mean, it's not instant or anything, but with a little bit of planning ahead of time. And the thing that I wonder also is, how different that felt to the students and the teachers to have the OER, the open textbooks, the ones that they created, versus having the traditionally created ones? And like, was there a loss of instruction, or were there any gaps or anything? And my guess is that any gaps that they noticed were so minimal in light of all that they were able to do with what they saved. It's kind of like taking your resources and looking at all of them and thinking, how do we want to invest this in a meaningful way?
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. So one of the things that I also like about the way that they approach it, they created a kind of a feedback loop for the teachers that were implementing this as well. So they created a specific Gmail account because they're a G Suite district, and they created a specific Gmail account that they could encourage any of the teachers to go in and provide any sort of feedback right away. So this lesson worked really well. This lesson needs some serious help, whatever. And then that all went into that one email account. And then because they compensated the teachers to come together on a frequent basis, that they were able to go back to those emails and say, okay, in unit 3, this specific lesson, this didn't work for you, and you, then we need to look at something different. And so there was a really great feedback loop that was part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. Okay. So that is
my other example. Yeah, so my other example would be Oxnard Union High School District in California. They were in the process, so California District started to transition to NGSS this past year, and I had met their assistant superintendent at the Q conference in Palm Springs in 2017. And he came to our Go Open and OER playground that we had with the different Southern California districts that were using OER, and had a great conversation with him, and was contacted by him and as well as his ed tech coordinator Jay Sorensen last summer. They started to make the transition for NGSS. They decided they were going to have to move their biology from 10th grade down to 9th grade. And so there was going to be this 1 year of kind of awkward transition where they were going to have almost 1,000 additional students taking biology. And so they couldn't find the biology textbooks that they had. It had an older copyright date. They also didn't have the funding to be able to buy those 1,000 textbooks. So they asked me, like, what were some of the options? So they also started with a CK12 Flex book. And this is also one of those like crazy timeline stories because they got a group of teachers. I got to go visit them on week 2. In 2 weeks, they started the CK12 Flex book. This group of teachers, they made sure that it was scoped based off of what they needed for NGSS at the time, especially with the new kind of biology standards and the integration of the sciences and in general. Made sure the vocabulary was aligned. They added in some additional content and whatever else, and they printed. That was the other thing for them because they were not a one-to-one environment. Had a group of teachers. One was a 30-year veteran teacher. One was a recently graduated teacher that had been trained in NGSS, and then 3 or 4 other teachers that had an average of anywhere from 10 to 15 years under their belt. So you had this wide variety of teachers that were doing this work. And when I came in on week 2, it was Thursday. So like really towards the end of week 2, they were in final editing mode and they were getting ready to send it to the printer, and they implemented 2 weeks later when school started. Wow. And so I had the chance to meet a lot of them, or see a lot of them of this team at Q Bold in May, this past May. And I was like, tell me all the things, like, how did it go? And they're like, oh my gosh, we learned so much. There are things that we want to change. There are things that we want to do differently. And I was like, that's awesome. And they're like, what's really cool is that we can. Like, we don't have to wait until the next textbook gets purchased.
Right.
We have the agency and kind of the autonomy to be able to provide that feedback based off of how our students performed or how we thought it went, and make the changes to implement this next school year, which is pretty fantastic as well.
Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned Q Bold, which Bold stands for Blended Online Lesson Design. Yes. And a lot of the idea behind Q Craft, which is a driver of this online summit, and the open pedagogy movement that all kind of goes together with this, is trying to empower teachers to use those tried and true best practices in teaching and learning, and making them accessible to everybody so that we can harness the power of good, solid teaching and learning, and not just rely on, what's always been done before. And so I can totally see the potential here for using some of these OER to build the kinds of lessons that you want to support all of this. But I want to kick this over to you and ask you that same thing is, how do you see being able to use some of the resources that are out there, some of those open resources to kind of like take back your classroom, take back the direction of your instruction, take back the curriculum and own it and make it something that you and your students really need and want?
Yeah. So I will tell you, I was in my teacher prep program during the years of No Child Left Behind. And this is not something that we ever addressed. We talked about the instructor's manual. We talked about the basal. And we didn't talk about going out and finding supplemental resources. We didn't talk about unpacking standards and really understanding what students needed to know. The more that I work with districts, I realize that there's this whole generation of teachers that are very similar to me or in very, very similar positions. Mm-hmm. We often don't know our own standards, and I am guilty of this myself. So when we get time to actually understand the standards that we are teaching, and that also helps, I mean, with district support, I think on that as well. It's hard for elementary because we teach all content areas, right. Because you have to know all of those. But time to unpack the down to it, where what are the essential standards that we need to make sure our kids know by the end of the school year. A couple of districts that I've worked with have really kind of narrowed, 150 standards and indicators down to 50. And then they narrow that down further to like 10 essential standards that we know that kids need to know. And then they backwards design it. So then to see like the different resources, and you start to, plug in the resources that are going to help you get there. I think that this is a great way to try new instructional models. It is really, developing that culture of trust with your district leaders, saying, I want to try this and I need your support on this, and we're going to fail, and that's okay, because we're going to learn from that. But I also know my kids. I know the local context, and we want to try to bring that into our classroom to make teaching and learning relevant. And so these resources can certainly help with that, especially given the permissions that I can customize the content and really make sure that that's relevant. So we get to try the new instructional models, whether that we're moving to project-based or we're doing more blended learning or whatever, insert instructional strategy here, that I get to try that with these resources and not necessarily be bound to day 1 through day 5. I give the pre-test, I give my spelling test on Friday, like I do my end of the whatever test on Friday. So we have more flexibility to try that. And I think it's been really interesting to have conversations with district leaders. When I was at the department and leading Go Open, it was very specific to, we are replacing a textbook, and it was very textbook substitute. And it was intentionally designed to be an easy entry point for districts. And now that I'm not bound to that, I get to ask the larger questions of district leaders saying, what do you want teaching and learning to look like in your classrooms or in your districts? And so really zooming out and asking those bigger questions and saying, okay, you all really want to try PBL? Great. Get trained in what that is, and then we'll find the resources, like they'll be there, and we have the flexibility in order to use that. So I think it's cool. I've heard some fantastic stories from teachers. One in particular that always stands out to me, and she's in Michigan. She is, I think she's nearing 30-year veteran teacher, and she was part of the My Open Book Project, which was the Department of Education in Michigan. They created social studies books. So she helped write the 5th grade social studies textbook. And to see her passion for teaching kind of like reignited after being in the classroom for so long, I can just put her up on stage. Like I really want her to go with me everywhere I go, because she's just like, oh my gosh. And she had state superintendent and state board members in her classroom towards the end of the school year back in May. And her kids were like, hey, you should hear about what we're doing here. And like owning their teaching, or like owning their learning. And you don't get that with textbooks. No. So providing more of these experiences, not only great for the students, but also to see what it's done for teachers. Ugh, I can't talk about it enough.
Right. Yeah. Well, hey, that's why you're here. So you can talk about it. Right.
Fair.
You're in a safe place. So I've got a follow-up question for you, but before I go there, let's go back into Belle's library for just a second. I would like you to climb up on the ladder. I told you I was going to keep going back here. I would like you to climb up on the ladder, and I want you to pull about, I'm going to use the number 10, but you don't actually have to count like a number 10, but like pull 10 binders down off of the shelves and pull one sheet out of each binder. And so what I'm asking for here is to help people have a little bit more of a concrete picture of what this really, really looks like, boots on the ground in the classroom. Pick out a handful of example resources, like tell me, like this kind of lesson plan, this kind of interactive flash activity, this kind of reading, this kind, like, what do they really, really look like? Like, get real granular, real, specific, and like say,
Sure.
Here's what a science thing would look like, or here's what a reading thing would look like.
Sure. So some of the ones that I've actually have used previously, even whenever I was teaching, was Engage New York. Some of the original kind of open educational resources started with them. That was through the Department of Education in New York, their Race to the Top funding that they got from the federal government. They developed full pre-K-12 language arts and math content. This is still available. You can go look at it today. It's on my list. This could be implemented as soon as, this afternoon or tomorrow. So they have it fully scoped and sequenced. It looks very similar to a textbook because it's what we're familiar with, in PDF and in Word. So you can access that. They've also built some online modules around this content. And so because it's fully scoped and sequenced, I typically point people to something like this to get started, kind of work from the foundation and then customize from there. So I would start with something like that. And I'm going to go back to second grade geometry when we did fractions. So I would start there because they have a pre-assessment for me ready to go. They have different lesson plans for me to do whole group. And then if I'm doing like math stations and where I'm pulling into small groups, that I can flex out my groups and have kids working independently or with a buddy. And then I'm going to do small groups and make sure that we're tracking, or if I need to reteach. There is additional kind of scaffolding for English language learners as well as special education students, where we pull in math manipulatives, making sure that it's very tactile, especially for the early learning years. So I can do that. And so it's already there for me, but I would probably customize it in the sense that I would pull in my own type of manipulative nature as part of things instead of only staying in the classroom. So that's kind of how I would approach that. And I will tell you, OER in general, as of right now, is heavier in science and in math than it is in some other content areas. Social studies is probably the third because you've got primary sources and things in the public domain that can also kind of fall into this. English language arts is really difficult. And I say that because you have a lot of copyrighted text, like novels, different anthologies that we tend to use. Some of the older content, when we're doing English arts, there may be some Shakespeare and that's all in the public domain, or things like that. But then we can build the units around that, and that can be open. And so I may do my full unit around Things Fall Apart, and I could build out that whole unit of study, and that could all be open licensed, but I still am going to have to purchase the actual text that every student would have a copy of it. So I guess that it's really important to highlight that math and science is where you'll find the most resources right now. And as more people join this community and kind of contribute, then we'll be able to find that and kind of build a rate. But I would say it kind of depends on the grade level content area too. So I gave the example of second grade math. If I were looking at something like high school English language arts, there are units that are available for some of those novels that we typically teach from. So that is certainly helpful. We're also finding a lot of districts that are looking in non-core content areas. They're trying to find resources and build that out. So world languages. I know that you are a former world language teacher.
Exactly.
And why would we invest in a textbook with photos that are already outdated as soon as they're printed, kind of thing, when we can give kids access to real life simulation and build up vocabulary lists and, and actually get them practicing the language. So there's my go-to is out of the University of Texas, Austin. There is an entire kind of college of OER and language learning that are developing OER for world languages, which is fantastic. And so we want to see more of that developed, especially kind of like the simulations where kids are practicing their speaking skills, as well as listening, whether it's podcasts or whatever else, and they're applying their skills. So world languages, business, health, like some very non-core content areas. Wow. And we're starting to see more development of resources there too.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Wow. And that's great. You know, even just and it's like what you said earlier, even just a few years ago when I was starting to kind of dip my toe into all of this, it was not nearly as comprehensive as it seems to be now. So here's the follow-up question I wanted to get to after we got some concrete examples of what some of this stuff kind of looks like. Going back into the library, we're going to pretend that you, Kristina, are Beast's librarian.
Fair.
Okay. So I have just wandered into this library.
Okay.
There's the ladder. There are the walls of all of the books and the 3-ring binders. And we're going to call them 3-ring binders because, again, Belle would never rip a page out of a book, I'm sure. But I'm looking up at all of these binders and I'm going, what in the world am I going to do with all of this? And I look at you and I go, Kristina, where in the world do I start? There's tons of stuff up here, which is great. And I know there's so much stuff that's usable up here, but oh my goodness, how in the world do I make sense? Where do I go first? Do you have any tips for me? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. So I think it takes looking at what you currently have and kind of back to my answer earlier, finding where you would want to supplement things to get started and doing a scan, either using the list that I have or there are other lists out there around OER, trying to see what already exists. So you want to see what already exists that you could revise and remix, or if you would have to potentially create things on your own, because that's part of it too. We all create things. We're the subject matter experts. And we also know our students. And so what would work best for them, for me to take something that pre-exists and then customize it or create something from scratch. And that's possible too. So I would say starting supplementally is where I would go for that. The way that we start to build these out and kind of curate what it actually looks like that I go to use, that also varies quite significantly. So a lot of schools will use tools that teachers are already familiar with. So Google Docs being one of the easiest ones. Yeah. And that it's a low barrier of entry. So if we can all contribute to a doc or whatever and say, okay, here's what we're going to use. I keep going back to my second grade, but second grade geometry, my fractions unit, here's that entire unit that we're going to build out. And that's Liberty Public Schools, when they did their 8th grade US history, it's all in a Google Doc and it's hyperlinked. It's like a hyperdoc. It hyperlinks out to this slide that we'll use, and then the different project options and the notes they could potentially take. And so Google works pretty easily for that. Others use their learning management system. They're like, in some states, like Delaware, the Department of Education, because there's 23 districts in the entire state, the Department of Education purchases their learning management system for the entire state. So a couple of the school districts that I've worked with there, they build everything out in Schoology, which is their LMS. I know that a lot of folks do that in Canvas as well. Lawrence Public Schools in Kansas, they're a Blackboard school, and they took a teacher on special assignment, a TOSA, which is very familiar to a lot of our friends in California. But they took a teacher on special assignment out of the 7th grade ELA classroom for a year. She built out their units that they would do, and they called it a shopping cart. So they put in a ton of different resources similar to a Spotify playlist, where you have all these different options that you could choose from. So then personalized playlists for your students. And so then she went back into the classroom and implemented, and then could provide more personalized, kind of customized pathways for her students. And they chose to do that through their learning management system. And then there are others like state level work, where they have their own repository that they're encouraging their districts to contribute to that larger repository, like Michigan, for example. And so they're doing that. So in addition to not only where do I start, but where do these things live, I think that's also an important part of the conversation to make sure that everyone has access to it as well. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so very simplistically, and I know it probably varies platform to platform, but what I could see is if I'm a teacher and I'm thinking I want to start integrating more of these open educational resources into my classroom, I could go out to a place like your website, although you don't have to, although they should.
I
Thank
could
you.
go out.
I'll pay you for the plug later.
You're welcome. I gotcha. So, yeah, anyway, so I could go there and I could scan through all of the different possible places to go. I could click on something like CK12 or something like Curriki or whatever.
Yeah.
And I could go dig down through into my subject area, into a specific topic within the subject area, into a specific subtopic. I can find those resources, which could be images, which could be text, which could be interactive text, which could be a little flash game, which could be, a variety of different things, a little video. And I just grab the link for it, stick it in a Google Doc, and now I have all of these extra resources, and I'm not having to go fish in YouTube, and I'm not having to do, a lot of the like Googling, or I'm going to scan Pinterest for 2 hours and hope that I find what I need and that I don't end up on do-it-yourself home improvement projects.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So I could use it like that, basically, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Very good. This is great. And it's all out there and it's all free. And it's all open, which is a higher standard than free.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. This is good stuff. And of course, if you're seeing this on the Ditch Summit website, you can scroll down and there are going to be tons of links of different places. Actually, really the big link that you need to check out is the one to Kristina's project, which we will definitely have available for you. That is an excellent place to start. And of course, if you're watching the video anyplace else, you can go to ditchsummit.com and go find Kristina's presentation. If someone wants to like Google it, or is there like an easy URL that we can just tell them if they don't want to go that route?
Yeah. So the easiest way to do that would be newamerica.org, which is my nonprofit that I work for. And then if you search pre-K-12 OER, that's probably the easiest way to do it.
That's easy. Okay, very good. And then if anybody wants to get in touch with you or the stuff that you're working on or whatever, where's the best place for them to go?
The Twitters.
Oh, yes. I've heard of the Twitters.
Oh, yes. Twitter, I'm KM Ishmael, ISHMAEL. Yep, there's a Moby Dick reference there for you all. Or ishmael@newamerica.org. Pretty simple as well.
Wonderful. That's great. All right. So after this video is over, I know we're all going to want to run off and check these things out and start building new lessons and new possibilities with all of these resources. So thank you, Kristina, for your time and for sharing all of your experience and all of the hours that you've put into all of this so that we can make it easy and start getting it to our kids. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
And of course, we're thankful to you for watching the QCraft Ditch Summit, and we're looking forward to seeing you on the next episode.